Hi, I'm Dr. David Dobson. Welcome to Conversations. Today, my guest is Dr. Fiona McQuarrie. Fiona is an educator, researcher, and author. We will be discussing her new book, Mixtape, which takes an in depth look at 21 songs from 1975 to 1985. Mixtape was named as a top read of 2023 by CityNews Vancouver. It's a great pleasure to have you with me today, Fiona.
Thank you for inviting me, David.
Share with me a little bit about how your interest in music started.
Oh gosh, well, my I grew up in a house that was seemed it had always had music playing. Both my mother and my father and my brother are big music fans, so we had quite an extensive collection of vinyl.
Yeah,
And there was a radio, of course. I think one of the most exciting times of my young life was getting my own transistor radio so I could play the radio stations that I chose. Um, when I was growing up in the 1960s and 70s, one thing I also remember was at that time there were a lot of variety shows on television, on
okay,
US television. So we got to see
okay,
a lot of acts then, even when we were too young to actually go to concerts.
yeah,
So it's just something that I think I just feel has always been
yeah,
around.
yeah,
Musically, myself, my father
yeah.
and my brother both play guitar. I've taken piano, I've taken
Nice.
voice lessons, and during the pandemic, I started taking songwriting lessons, which has
Oh,
been
neat.
a real interesting development because I
Uh-huh.
never thought I had the skills to be a songwriter. I'm still not sure I do, but at least now I understand the process.
Yeah,
But I have no ambitions to be a performer. I'm quite happy to listen to what other people make and enjoy that.
very nice. You started your career as a music critic. Why did you decide to enter academia?
Well, it wasn't a conscious decision, I have to be honest.
Okay,
I was working as the music writer at the Vancouver Sun, and I
okay,
ended up leaving that job because the management in my department was not very good, and it
okay,
wasn't an enjoyable job anymore.
okay,
And then I was sort of at loose ends for a while, and I moved to Victoria because that's where my boyfriend, now my husband, was
okay,
living. And
okay,
I got a job at a trust company.
okay.
And working there on a day-to-day basis and
Yeah,
watching how people interacted with money and how they managed money and the emotions and the
yeah,
feelings that it generated, I thought was
yeah,
really interesting.
yes.
So I figured if this is going to be my new career path, I should know something about how this operates.
Okay,
So I went to Camosun College and took an accounting course,
okay,
which I have to admit I was not very good at, but it was interesting. And
okay.
then I took a management course, and that's where the light bulb really went on because suddenly I understood
Yeah,
why the organizations I had worked at were so
yeah.
unpleasant to be
Hmm.
an employee at.
Yeah.
And I started taking more courses at Camosun, and then I transferred to SFU
Hmm.
into their Bachelor of Business Administration program.
Okay,
And I finished my BBA, and the job market was really terrible at that time.
okay,
So I
okay.
figured, oh, well, I'll do an MBA. And when I was getting towards the end of my MBA, two of my professors at SFU said, you should think about doing a PhD. And
Hmm.
honest to God, I really didn't know what a PhD was, other than all the professors at SFU had one. But we talked about it, and I thought, well,
Yeah.
this is something I think I could do. And I was lucky enough to get a really good scholarship at the University of Alberta. And
Okay.
so I lived in Edmonton for the better part of 4 years and
Yeah.
did a PhD. And
Yeah.
here I am. It really wasn't a conscious career
Yeah.
path at all. It just sort of
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Very fascinating story. You have been writing about music for more than 30 years and wrote a book on songs from 1975 to 1985. Why did you focus on those particular years in music?
A couple of reasons. This is actually my second music book. I
Okay.
wrote an earlier one called Songbook, which
Okay.
covered the decade previous to that.
Okay.
And I like that format. I like the
Yeah.
format of looking at individual songs and
Yeah.
sort of putting them together to
Yeah.
characterize what an entire period looked
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
And the period that Mixtape covers was also the
Yeah.
period where I started being a teenager, and then I
Okay.
graduated from
Yeah.
high school and went out into the world.
Yeah.
And it was also just a fascinating period of music. There were so
Yeah.
many different styles going on. And there was a lot of really good music coming out. It wasn't just disco, it wasn't just glam rock, there was everything. And at that time also, I think radio stations were broad-minded enough to program a whole range of musical styles. It wasn't as compartmentalized as it is now. So I remember it being a very exciting time in music, and seeing as it's a while ago now, I thought it would be good to write about that so that younger music listeners can get a sense of how interesting and exciting that time in popular music was.
Nice. Why did you title your book Mixtape?
Okay, well, this is something also that younger listeners would know. But like the images on the book cover are showing, cassette tapes cassettes were a huge technological breakthrough, because you could, unlike say a vinyl turntable, you could make your own cassette. You could put a cassette in the machine and record things. And initially, mixtapes were off the radio, which meant that you had to sit by the radio and wait until the song you wanted came on, and then push the button at the right time. But when you could connect your turntable to your cassette deck, you could make a tape with any mixture of songs that you wanted. And to me, the image of the mixtape, particularly the homemade mixtape, sort of symbolizes to me how diverse and different that era of music was. And it was also the very start of music listeners being able to choose and program the songs they wanted, as opposed to getting a vinyl record with the songs already ordered on it. And so it was sort of the gateway, I guess, to streaming and playlists and all the other forms of consuming music that we have now.
Definitely very exciting time. I remember making my own music on those cassettes, tapes, and and also remember sometimes those the reel get winded up on your tape, and remember taking them out and try to unroll them,
taking the pencil and putting it in the hole.
yes fun time there, those. Your book is based on your research. Please share a little bit about your research.
Okay. Well, one skill that I acquired both in journalism and in academia is deep research, and verifying sources, and constructing a story based on secondary sources. For this book, I was able to talk to some of the artists that I cover. Others are no longer with us. So I relied pretty much on secondary sources. And one thing I've also learned, particularly in music journalism, is that you should have at least two sources saying the same thing before you go with that. And it also there's no definitive story. Everyone has their own, there's facts like dates and times when things happen. But in terms of how things happen, different people have different perceptions. And I think part of telling the story of the song is to respect that different people might have different ideas about what the song means, or how it came about, or the impact that it had. So it's a process of taking the individual song, and I think the point I sort of started with each one is, okay, who wrote this song? And who performed it for us? And do we know why they wrote this song? Like, what led them to this? Was the record company telling them, we want a hit? Or did something happen to them that made them want to write a song about it? And something else that's interesting, too, about using this format is when songs are covered, oftentimes the artist who covers them comes up with a completely different conception of what the song means or what it should sound like. And to me, that's just fascinating, like how songs morph and evolve as they go out into the world and different people perform them.
Can you share one of your experience with one of the artists in your research you met with and have a discussion about their work?
Yes, there's a chapter in the book about a Vancouver band called Doug and the Slugs, and they had their first hit single was Too Bad. And I actually covered Doug and the Slugs when I worked at the Sun. And Doug Bennett, the lead singer, unfortunately is no longer with us, but The rest of the band still performs with a different lead singer.
Okay.
And Simon Kendall, the keyboard player, who's also
Yeah.
a very experienced musician in the Vancouver music scene,
Okay.
has sort of taken over the administration, I guess, of the band
Okay.
and
Okay.
overseen their songs being remastered and released digitally.
Okay.
And so I
Okay.
had a wonderful conversation with him
Okay.
in the garden at his house on a very hot August afternoon. I hadn't seen him since Doug Bennett's funeral, so that was a
Okay.
really nice chance to reconnect and to learn a bit more about this band that I'd admired for a very long time and had
Yeah.
written stories about, but just to
Yeah.
dig into some of the
Yeah.
more details about how they functioned and how that
Yeah.
particular song came about.
Yeah. I also had opportunity to listen to some of the songs when I saw from your book. Some of the songs are listed, so some of the videos are very fun to watch also along with the songs. So it's pretty cool. You discuss 21 songs in your book. Is there a specific song from that period that still resonates with you?
Oh gosh, I think all of them do. One of the criteria for being in the book is that I had to like the song enough to
Yeah.
spend a couple of
Yeah.
weeks with it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to pick Der Kommissar by
Okay.
Falco. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is
Okay.
this is a song that I think represents how
Yeah.
diverse and how open-minded the
Yeah.
music industry was at that time.
Yeah.
Because what are the chances that a B-side by an
Yeah.
artist singing in German
Yeah.
and sort of rapping in German as well would
Yeah.
become a huge hit in North America is the chances were very small, but it
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
I also remember with that song, the first time I heard it
Yeah.
was when I was living in Victoria, and there
Mhm.
was a new wave radio station out of Seattle that played the
Okay.
most amazing music.
Right.
And I heard the song one night,
Yeah.
and they had this feature that they did one evening. I think I still have it on a cassette that I
Okay.
taped off the radio. Is there were so many cover versions of this song that they played 5 different versions of it back to back.
Oh, neat.
That's how popular it was.
Wow.
And I also remember about that song that
Yeah.
in Victoria there was this video store that also had a side business where you
Okay.
could go and rent a record and take
Oh.
it home and tape it and then bring it back a few days later. And that didn't last too long. I think
Yeah.
the record companies cracked down on them and they stopped doing it. But while they were doing it,
Yeah.
Der Kommissar was one of the records that I rented and taped. So yeah,
Neat.
it sort of encapsulates a lot of
Yeah.
different things that were happening
Yeah.
at that time.
Yeah.
And it's also a banging song. It's just great. It's got such a good rhythm. And even if
Yeah.
you don't speak German, which I don't, I was very
Yeah.
grateful that I have a friend who's a native German speaker who I could
Yeah.
go to and say, what does this lyric mean? It's just very catchy. The rhythms and
Yeah.
the beats of the words
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
universal.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you listen to this music, old music, do you start dancing or does like
Occasionally, yeah, occasionally, yeah.
Yeah, because some of the music has such a nice dance beat. It's kind of bring you back those moves.
Yep,
So
for sure.
yeah. What do you hope the readers takes away from your book, Fiona?
For younger readers, I hope it introduces them to some songs that they might not know, but that they
Yeah.
might really enjoy and might check
Yeah.
out and might
Yeah.
find out some more about these artists because
Yeah.
a number of these artists that I write about, this was their hit.
Yeah.
It was their only hit.
Yeah.
Even though some of them also made some very interesting music
Uh-huh.
later on.
Yeah.
For readers sort of in my general age group, they'll
Yeah.
probably recognize some of these songs.
Yeah.
They might not have heard them for a while. And
Yeah.
personally, I mean, this is my perspective as someone who writes about music, but I
Yeah.
always find it interesting to learn something about the song, not
Yeah.
just that it's a great
Yeah.
song, but hey,
Yeah.
who's this artist? Who is this
Yeah.
person?
Yeah.
Who's his name on the label?
Mhm.
And so I hope that this book will give people some more information about songs that they know already, but they don't know much about the artist.
Yeah.
And also for older listeners too, or older readers,
Yeah.
it will hopefully give them some more
Mhm.
sounds to check out and hopefully
Yeah.
to enjoy.
Yeah. Thank you for your time, Fiona. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thank you, David.